Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Missing Found by Margaret Peterson Haddix. Catherine snorted. Missing link, maybe, she said. Jonah reached down and picked up the letter. By the time he'd straightened it again, Chip had joined him on the porch, either because he was curious about the letter, too, or because he really did have a crush on Catherine. What's that? Chip asked. Jonah shrugged. Just a prank, I guess, he said. 7th grade was all about pranks. You could always tell when someone in the neighborhood was having a sleepover because then kids who weren't invited suddenly had gobs of toilet paper in the street, in the trees in their yard, or their cell phones rang at midnight. I'm watching you, followed by gales of laughter. Pranks are supposed to be funny, Catherine objected. What's funny about that? Nothing, Chip said. Jonah noticed that Chip was smiling at Catherine, not looking at the letter. Now, maybe if it said 10 o'clock, do you know where your brain is? Or missing one brain cell, please return to Jonah Skidmore. It's all I've got. Maybe that would be funny. Catherine said. She yanked the letter out of Jonah's hand. Give me a few minutes. I could turn this into a really good prank. Jonah snatched the letter back. That's okay, he said, and crammed the letter into his jeans pocket. He knew it was just a prank. It had to be. But for a second, staring at those words, you are one of the missing, he almost believed them. Especially since he'd been telling Chip about being adopted. What if somebody really was missing him? He didn't know anything about his birth parents. All the adoption records had been sealed. He'd had such trouble understanding when he was a little kid. He'd been a little obsessed with animals back then, so first he pictured elephant seals waddling on top of official-looking papers. Then, when his parents explained it a little better, he pictured crates in locked rooms, indoors with Easter seals. He'd been a pretty strange kid. In fact, his face burned a little at the memory. He'd even given a report in 2nd grade on all the different uses of the word seal, from Arctic ice seals to Navy seals to sealed adoption papers. The report had included the line, and so, that's why it's interesting that I'm adopted, because it makes me unique. His parents had helped him with that one. Wait a minute, Tony McGillicuddy had been in his 2nd grade class, and so had Jacob Haynes and Dustin Cravers. What if they remembered too? What if they sent this letter because of that? Jonah narrowed his eyes at Catherine, who took a step back under the intensity of his gaze. You know what? He said, glaring at her. You're right. This isn't funny at all. He pulled the letter back out of his pocket and ripped it into shreds. He dropped the shreds into Catherine's hand. Throw that away from me, okay? Okay, she said, apparently too surprised to think of a smart alecky comeback. Want to come out and play basketball with us when you're done? Chip asked as she started to close the door. Catherine tilted her head to the side, considering. Jonah figured she was adding up all the possibilities. 7th grader, acts interested, plus a chance to tick off older brother, plus a chance to show off. For a girl, Catherine was pretty good at basketball. It seemed like a no-brainer to Jonah, but Catherine shook her head. No thanks, I just did my nails, she said, and pulled the door all the way shut. Chip groaned. She's your sister, he said. Tell me, is she playing hard to get? Who knows, Jonah said, but he wasn't thinking about Catherine. By dinner time, Jonah had convinced himself that Tony McGillicuddy and Jacob Haynes and Dustin Cravers were a bunch of idiots, and he really didn't care what they thought or did. They could send him stupid letters all they wanted. It didn't matter to him. He stabbed his fork into his mashed potatoes and savored the sound of metal hitting the plate. He didn't pay much attention to what Mom and Dad and Catherine were talking about. Something about some kind of gene that the popular girls in 6th grade owned. But, honey, you're popular, and you don't have those genes, so you can't be right about having all those popular girls that own them, Mom argued. Mom, Catherine said. Then the doorbell rang. For a moment, everybody froze. Dad and Jonah with forkful of mouths to the fork filled halfway to their mouths. Mom and Catherine in mid-argument. The doorbell rang again, one urgent peal after another. I'll get it, Jonah said, standing up. Whoever it is, tell him to come back later. It's dinner time, Mom said. Mom always made a big deal about family dinner. The way that other parents made their kids go to church, Jonah's parents made him and Catherine all sit down at the dinner table with them every night, and they usually had to go to church anyway. Jonah realized he was still holding his fork, so he stuck it into his mouth as he walked to the door. No point wasting perfectly good mashed potatoes. It didn't take him long to gulp them down, lick the fork one more time, and then transfer the fork to the other hand so he could grab the doorknob. But the doorknob rang 3 more times before he could open the door. It was Chip, who was standing on the porch. At first, he didn't even seem to notice that the door was open. He was so focused on pounding his hand against that doorbell. Hey, Jonah said. Finally, Chip stopped hitting the doorbell. The chimes kept ringing behind Jonah for a few seconds. "I've got to talk to you," Chip said. He was breathing hard like he ran all the way from his house, 6 driveways down. He shoved his hands through his curly blonde hair, maybe trying to wipe away sweat, maybe trying to restore order to the mess. It didn't help. The curls stuck out in every direction, and Chip had eyes that were darting all around, like he couldn't keep them trained on one thing for more than a second or an instant. "Okay," Jonah said, "we're eating right now, but later on." Chip clutched Jonah's t-shirt. I can't wait," he said. "You have to help me, please." Jonah peeled Chip's fingers off his shirt. Sure," Jonah said. "Calm down. What do you want to talk about?" Chip's darting eyes took on the houses on either side of Jonah's. He peered down the long hallway to the kitchen, where he could probably see just the edge of the dinner table. "Not here," Chip said, lowering his voice. "We've got to talk privately, somewhere no one can hear us." Jonah glanced back over his shoulder. He could see the perfectly crisp fried chicken leg lying on his plate beside his half-eaten potatoes. He could also see Catherine peering curiously around the corner at him. "All right," Jonah said. "Wait here for just a second." He went back to the table. "Mom, Dad, can I be excused?" he asked. "No clean plate club for you," Catherine taunted, which was really stupid. Mom and Dad had stopped making a big deal out of clean plates years ago, after Mom read somewhere about childhood obesity. "I'll put everything in the refrigerator and eat it later," Jonah said, picking up his plate. "I'll take care of that," Mom said quietly, taking the plate and the fork from him. "Go on and help Chip." Jonah cast one last longing glance at the chicken and went back to the front door. He kind of wanted Mom and Dad to say no, that he wasn't allowed to leave the table. He didn't know what anybody thought he could do to help Chip. The way Chip was acting, it was like he was going to confess a murder or something. Or maybe it was something like he just found out his parents were splitting up and he had to decide which one to live with. Jonah knew a kid that happened to, and it was awful, but Jonah couldn't give advice about something like that. Chip practically had his face pressed against the glass of the front door, waiting for Jonah to come back. "Come on," Jonah said. "Let's go to my room." This was strange, too, because Chip had never been in Jonah's room before. They were play basketball in the driveway and maybe come into the kitchen for a drink of water type of friends, not let's go hang out in my room friends. Jonah held the front door open for Chip, and then Chip followed him up the stairs. Chip didn't even glance around when they got to Jonah's room, which was good, because maybe he wouldn't notice along with the sports posters. Jonah still had one up from 3rd grade that had a Lego roller coaster. Jonah shut the door and sat down on the bed. Chip sank into the desk chair. "I got one too," Chip said. He was clutching his face now, almost like that kid in the Home Alone movie. "One what?" Jonah asked. "One of those letters about being missing." Chip pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket. Jonah could tell that Chip had already folded it and unfolded it many times. The creases were beginning to fray. Chip unfolded it once more, and Jonah could see it was just like the letter he'd gotten. 6 typewritten words on an otherwise blank sheet of paper. "You are one of the missing." "Chip, it's a prank," Jonah said. "A joke that's not even funny." But he was thinking, Chip wasn't in 2nd grade with Dustin and Jacob and Tony. He's not adopted, I don't think, so this is really stupid. Jonah leaned back against the wall, more relaxed than he had been in hours. "It's nothing," he told Chip. "Yeah, that's what I thought," Chip said. You know what's the worst thing? You know what the worst thing is? I was even kind of happy when I pulled this out of the mailbox. Like, hey, I'm not the new kid anymore. Somebody actually noticed me enough to try to play a prank on me. I mean, a stupid prank, but still." Jonah shrugged. "So stay happy, and congratulations, you got a prank letter." Chip bolted forward, his face suddenly hard. "No," he said. "No, 'cause, see, then I went inside, and my dad was standing there, and I was like, 'Look, Dad, I got this prank letter.' And then I'm telling him all about it, how you got the same letter, and you told me about being adopted, and I could tell you were kind of mad about the letter, and I thought it might be because you're, like, sensitive about the whole adoption thing." "No, I'm not," Jonah said. Chip just ignored him. "And then you ripped the letter up and threw it to pieces in your sister's face." "I did not throw it in her face." Chip kept talking as if Jonah hadn't said a word. "And I'm just going on and on about how obviously the letter had nothing to do with you being adopted, because I got the same letter and I'm not adopted. And I don't know what I was thinking, because then I said, 'Right, Dad? I'm not adopted, am I, Dad?' And then my dad said, Chip's mouth kept moving, but no sound came out. It was like he had run out of words, or at least run out of the words he wanted to say. Jonah froze, sitting very precisely in the center of the bed. "What did your dad say?" he asked carefully. Chip was staring straight ahead, his eyes vacant. "Are you adopted?" Jonah whispered. Wordlessly, Chip nodded. And that ends today's reading.